Okay, hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream, and I hopefully you guys can all hear me now. We're a little late getting going on here, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and we've got this rolling. So let me just do a quick check of the chat. There it is. Yes. Yeah, it's I don't know if you guys can see above me. So I'm playing around with audio thingies in my life right now. We've had a terrible problem with the audio of late. Um, in that with our this microphone here right in front of me is feeding into an audio interface where it sounds absolutely delightful coming out of it. So I sound wonderful and warm, and if you could hear me in my headphones, you'd be amazed how wonderful this all sounds. And then that gets fed into the camera feed to get mixed into the video signal, and it turns into absolute hot garbage. So I'm working on that. I've at least got a way to monitor that. And hopefully by next show we'll have this worked out a little better. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to avoid going in through the microphone feed on my video board because the microphone feed on that one it's unbalanced and it picks up every bit of electronic garbage on the planet. But if that's what we got to do in order to get things back, I don't know. We'll figure something out, but we'll do it later. We are also over my head. You see these gray panels right above me. We're starting to do some things with the room treatments to help that out a lot. But honestly, having heard what I sound like through the video part of the feed, the problem is not so much the microphone itself. It's something about the way it's getting muxed into the video. So we'll work on it, and that's a project for next time. Anyway, I want to say thank you everyone for coming in here. And this is audio sounds a little better today. Yeah, it's got a long way to go, but we'll get there. Anyway, so hey, I want to say hi to R.A. Scott, Richard Scott, who already has opinions on yes, we do need floppies, and we'll get into that in a bit. Tim Legrallo, Tim Kilbreth. Yes, I was sitting on Legrallo. What was that? Anyway, so welcome from Rockford, Illinois. Chris Prazel is here. Mike Beam is in the house. Tyler T. Oro Viejo joining us. April Fool's Minneapolis. A slush storm forecast. Wonderful. That sounds horrible. Robbie's Weinberg's joining us here from Toledo, Ohio. And yeah, at least we had Ed from Toronto out here. Agent DeCamp from Florida. Great crowd here today. Thanks everyone for showing up here. Dia Libby from Roseville, California. Welcome. And we'll do the best we can with kind of an interesting topic for me. It's one that it came out as a result of some conversations we've had around the office and also with various people in life, because we talk about comic books pretty much every day. The state of the industry is of keen interest to us all here. Brian Price joins us here from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Welcome. But in particular, it's in a way it's reacting to if you guys have ever heard the podcast Comics by Perch. Really not sure who the actual name of the guy is. I guess Perchington, something like that. I've never really quite caught his real name, but some intelligent comments about comics, and you can tell he's getting a little worked up about the state of the industry one. And I'll try to be as fair as I can and give you my perspective on it. But he had a recent podcast where he was talking about basically anyone who tells you it's going well, they're lying to you, and they should really stop, because it's not. And raises some excellent points, and we'll take it from there in just a minute. I do have a little bit of comic-based news I want to get through first. Some notes on this one here. Please, if you guys are trying anything past the 26.1 build frame, so if you've gotten your feet wet in the 26.0.2s or 26.2s, do check out the brand new build 3912. We just put it out just an hour or two ago. We've continued to refine the work that we did on tags. Last time I was typing up the release notes, by the way, for what we did in just the last 3 weeks, and it went on for miles of just all the changes we've done. It's amazing how much we've done with the program just in all that time. I mean, it's literally so much in what we had put of the just single line bullets of of the changes in the program that honestly, it's too long to put into a set of coherent release notes. We're going to have to like just take the top 10 items and show that is what we did with 26.2. But in particular for the very latest few builds, we've done some things to drill down on a couple of weird little memory issues that have cropped up, which never would have come to mind if it weren't for folks like our own Brian Stewart, who's doing things like dropping 5,000 pictures at once into the program and saying, hey, I got a, handle cannot be allocated exception. Can you trace that down? It's like, yeah, yes, we did. And we found ways that, yes, you were wasting 2 memory handles every time you do a thingy here, and it would never, ever, ever, ever come up if you weren't dropping 5,000 items at the same time. But anyway, we did fix a bunch of that stuff. Worth doing, actually. It was a kind of an interesting exercise for us because we found out a lot of really strange things in Windows that are, as far as I can tell, documented absolutely nowhere as far as how they were abusing memory with different things like when you set timers. And so we've had to rethink some really long-standing things we've done in ComicBase when we wanted to set up a little delay of an action, because under really extremely heavy load, it could cause problems. But it's the kind of thing where like we could use the program for a week and never hit this, but we managed to somehow get this in the same time. This should also give you an idea for how big the correction load has been. Just to give you guys an idea, by the way, I thank you for everyone who asked. I did finish out the gazebo project. I am exhausted, but it does look very nice, and my deck is now, once again clear of construction material and lumber and ladders and scaffolding and everything else now. And I thank you to everyone who loaned me ladders or helped out or helped, hold roof sections in place as we bolted them together and such. But anyway, that is all done, and that's wonderful. But it also means that for this whole weekend, I didn't do what I normally do, and I didn't poke my head in every few hours to see what's up with ComicBase and take care of pending corrections and things like that. So I got back to my desk after I'd done the last of the returning of things a little after noon on Monday, and there were 28,000 corrections waiting for me to look at, as well as everything else that had gone on over the weekend. It's like, oh my God in heaven. So yeah, just crazy amounts of data is going our way, and you will be seeing a lot of this in this week's update, which we've actually gotten on top of. And so that'll be coming out. We would probably push an update on Wednesday. If not, we'll wait till Friday. If you guys don't know what's going on with things, there's 2 big distributors in the comic industry right now, Lunar and Penguin Random House. Basically, think of it as one. Lunar distributes DC and Image, and Penguin Random House distributes Marvel. And Lunar also handles a bunch of the smaller publishers and things like that. But because you kind of need both Marvel and DC as part of what you put out every week, we try to wait for everything, but for reasons, we get the Lunar books on Wednesday and we get the Penguin Random House books on Friday, which drives me a little bit crazy because I'm ready to go as of Wednesday night to push the update, and then it's usually a good idea to wait till Friday just to get it all done in one. Because I noticed that when we were pushing like 5 updates a week, it was confusing a lot of people, and it was not doing great. Dr. B Drum says gazebo should be the code name for the next release. No, we usually go for something kind of grand and thematic, but we're gonna have to do something better than gazebo. Maybe pavilion, but yeah, even that sounds. But wasn't that like I think pavilion was like the line of line of HP desktops, which when the San Jose Sharks Stadium did what everyone else does, where they build it with public money, and then they think, well, we could make more money if we lend out the naming rights on it. So the San Jose Stadium became the HP Pavilion. Get it? And that's the home ice for the San Jose Sharks. Yeah, let's not do that. Anyway, so all right, so and then we have topics about once the boomers, the Gen Xers die off, floppies will be cooked, etc. Oh well, could be. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's all the in-between stuff I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I was going to say, good news, no one died this week, and then I just found out Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac just passed away. And somebody sprayed weird liquids at Lindsey Buckingham, which ironically is the top story of the whole thing is that Lindsey Buckingham gets sprayed and Christine McVie died is like a footnote in the story. It's like, what? Anyway, but no one in the comics industry that I know died of this week, so that's good. That's puts us way ahead of last week, where it seemed like everything was dropping dead every 2 seconds. So yeah, so let's get on to the things, and let's talk about, is the comic industry itself dying? So the argument put forth by Comics by Perch, and again, it's worth checking this podcast. There's two comics related podcasts I try to dip in and check most episodes of. Comics by Perch and Thinking Critical, where it's just different perspectives on the industry, different takes on everything. I think Perch comes from a retailer background and so forth, and I get the sense he's never on camera, so I have no idea what the guy looks like. I have no idea what his real name is or anything like that. But I get the feeling we're kind of from a similar age and background and things like that. And so I imagine our journey through comic books has been, quite similar in terms of a lot of the highlights. We talk about comic books that you remember quite fondly. He's, obviously describing what is like X-Men 132 and 133, because he's talking about the events of the story. And I remember reading the thing vividly. There were some of the first X-Men comics I ever picked up and so forth. The first appearance of the Hellfire Club, and when the first time you ever got to see Wolverine really cut loose and so forth. But yeah, he's describing all this stuff as like the good old days. But what he was talking about in his latest podcast, which I guess is now the podcast before the latest one, is basically a reader had written in and said, yeah, look, same old story in my in my neighborhood here is the local comic store, LCS's, is, for everyone in the know, is just announced that, yeah, everyone, as of the end of April, we're not doing any more orders. So yeah, we'll keep on fulfilling your subscriptions, through your pull lists up through the date that we stop ordering and so forth. But after that, it's like, yeah, we got in the store, but you might have noticed that the inventory in the store has shifted more and more towards board games and Funko Pops and trade paperbacks and things like that, and we're just not going to be ordering new comics. Now, I've said a lot of times beforehand that just in order to power the database for ComicBase, we order like a mid-sized comic store, which unfortunately is getting truer and truer, in that we try to order one each of every real new issue. Certainly from Marvel, DC, but also from the smaller publishers as well. If you price your issue at like $15, we're not going to order it. Not just for the database, because we love y'all, but there's a finite amount of money in the pile, and our comic bill is absolutely amazing. But also we're not going to order the 73 variants you put out of Amazing Spider-Man number 6 series number 1, because we're not going to order 1,000 copies of one issue in order to be able to order the 1 in 1,000 variant. We're not going to order 100 issues of the Red Sonja versus Vampirella, and just in order to get certain key variants. Those are ones where we hope to God that the listings that the publishers gave us are true, or at least close enough, and that when someone actually did get a hold of the actual things, God bless you hardcore collectors on that one, that you will send us in a better cover than the publishers gave us when we solicited it. Because like I say, when you make the math of ordering comic books, like you have to order 1,000 of something or 100 of something to buy one. Yeah, even people like us, we're not going to play that hard, especially now with the average comic book rising between $5 and $6 now. But with that said, you might have noticed that we all left in the last 10 years. We probably, a lot of us, if we live in any kind of major suburban or urban area, have gone from a place where there were few thousand legitimate comic book stores on the planet, and then diamond bankruptcy, COVID, bad times all around, things like that. But bit by bit by bit, we're getting more and more that, like, if I drop up into, I've still got access to probably about 4 good comic stores within decent driving distance. But the 2 that are most local to me out in Franklin over here, I'm going to say 1.5 of them are legit comic stores anymore. I don't want to name names. I mean, it's honestly, anyone who enters the comic book field as a retailer, you have my absolute respect. It's one of the hardest businesses I could possibly imagine pulling off, just in terms of the mechanics of what you have to do to make the rent, to make everything happen, the number of stock you have to deal with, the vast amount of product knowledge you have to bring to the table in order to earn money that is not super huge. I mean, it's almost any business you can think of is easier to do. And I think the retailers who do it because they love pop culture. They love doing the industry. But more and more, you get to a point where, in order to make your nut, so us ordering one of everything from Diamond, no, not Diamond, but the Lunar or Penguin Random House is pretty much enough to have us hit the minimums in order to keep going. For a regular comic store, what you're really hoping for is that you'll get a lot of people coming in the door every week, dropping, I don't know, $60, $70 a month maybe. But you've got to have regular folks coming through the door who keep on buying the next issue of the things they love. And you're hoping to introduce them to new things they'll love as other things fade out or things like that. But you really want to see the same guys come through the door day after day after day. And when you lose a customer, like a long-time customer, when they move off, when they lose interest in comics, when they just decide, it's too much for me, and whatever the thing is, that hurts. And after a while, more and more shops I'm seeing have decided, because again, they've got to stay alive. This is the number one rule when you're running any kind of business: is do what you got to do to stay alive. Is they shift more and more of their floor space, their comic mix, etc., from comic books, new issues, and so forth, to something that's moving better on the store, whether it's toys, trade paperbacks, whatever have you. And it's, like I say, it's rough out there. So when you get to the point where you can no longer justify going through the trouble, and there is a lot of trouble to hook up a lot of customers with the ordering materials they have, so that they can tell you, okay, yeah, I want to get this issue of this this series of Spider-Man, which we're going to discontinue in 12 issues and restart again anyway. So I mean, everything is lots and lots of churn for you, lots and lots of special stuff here. You have to quiz them on which cover you try to go for, the A, the B, the C, the D, whatever else. Lots and lots of friction in the whole process of keeping that customer involved. And when you're sitting there going like, man, we're barely making the minimum to even stay viable on the whole thing. I get why more people who run these shops are sitting there saying, yeah, we have comics here. This is a comic store. You'll notice we have lots of Spider-Man t-shirts and, lunchboxes and, all the things. But yeah, can you buy the latest issue of Amazing Spider-Man's, on the racks? Not so much. And so I get why that's a thing. It doesn't make me happy though, because again, I'm a guy. I grew up, born in 1967. Started collecting comic books as it'd be like the sort of thing like you'd beg your parents to grab you one at the local store when you first started. When you first started doing chores to earn money, it was what you blew your money on. When I had a paper route and I could go out and like regularly spend my money, I'd be like running to the Tom Thumb right after you finished your thing and checking the racks and seeing if there are any new issues of some Marvel book that I was into that like hadn't been pawed over by too many people and so forth. We did all the things. These are the parts of our life that we fell in love with, that kind of kept with us with us and throughout life and kind of stick with you. But it's a rare person who fell in love with comic books, even back in that era where all my friends read comics, right? We trade them on on the court where we grew up. We all had issues of Spider-Man, and so I read my first issue, with featured Green Goblin, which was the coolest villain ever, and so forth. You trade it with your friend Paul Hemberger, and you'd be reading him, as you're tent camping in your backyards on summer nights and everything. And it's you were the guy who was like, no, we have to respect the comics, man. Don't bend the pages over and wad them up and stick them in your back, in your back pocket as you bike around the court. So yeah, that made me an early type A guy. So and when they first invented the plastic bag and much later the board, you knew I was going to be one of the first guys on there because I respected comic books. But we grew up in a world where everybody had comic books, and honestly, in a world with 4 TV channels, really only 3, and mostly running around playing stuff. There were no video games. There were, you had limited access to movies and things like that. Comic books were the greatest thing that you could read as a boy growing up. I mean, it was the best game in town. And so, it's easy to see why they were such a big thing with people of our age. But when you look at how things are going today, I mean, let's just be honest. It's not going the same. It's, one of the most depressing things I ever did is the last time I held a garage sale. I had this genius idea that I was going to take a bunch of the leftover free comic book day, comics that tend to pile up around here because again, we order a lot of comics to drive the database, and especially when Free Comic Book Day had a deal where like you had to, we had like 47 offerings for Free Comic Book Day, and you had to order them in packs of 25. So, for a year, I had, just like 3-4 feet worth of comic books that I was giving away every time people would order something from me on Atomic Avenue. I would just fill up the box with as many extra Free Comic Book Day comics as it would be until I would, hit the next pound mark and I have to pay more shipping, and then you back off by one. But I had this genius idea that, well, we got to get rid of some old junk around the house anyway. We'll have a garage sale. Hey, I'll advertise. I'll give you away free comic books if you come to my garage sale. And I thought, this is genius marketing. I mean, what could go wrong? And we put out our stuff. We got rid of some old furniture and things like that. And old power tools and whatnot. And by and large, it was crazy how little interest there was in the comic books. I mean, there was a family I remember very well. It's like you got 3 boys. They're all about 6 to 8 years old, and they're looking at stacks of Spider-Man and Moon Knight and whatever else just out there. It's like, hey guys, yeah, you're free. You can take up to 3 of them. Just each of them. And whatever you want. And they're like, nah, that's okay. How much are the Legos? And that's kind of how the whole thing went. And it's like the idea of like a 6 to 8 year old turning down free comic books. I mean, granted, they were Free Comic Book Day books, but they were free. Blew my freaking mind. And you really had to come back from that one saying like, man, the world has really changed. I mean, these guys are growing up in a world that is a lot different than what we did. And yeah, you get how after a while, these guys, they could be wearing Spider-Man, they could have Spider-Man stickers on their bikes. They could be wearing Spider-Man t-shirts. They could, be, watching Batman the Animated Series, or whatever else on TV, all day long. And the idea of reading a Spider-Man floppy comic book was kind of like why would you? It was just one of those things. And so going back to, Perch's open question on this whole thing, there's 2 narratives that are going on simultaneously in the comic industry right now. And, they're kind of both true. And you kind of wonder how you feel about that. Narrative number 1 is it's the ICV2 crowd. It's the guys who are looking over at the industry statistics, which honestly dodgy as hell. I mean, it must be said. When you look at the source of, like say, well, we're looking at book scan POS things, but there's only a tiny fraction of stores that have book scans, so we're not really monitoring what we think we are, and we're probably disproportionately monitoring the stuff from the very wealthiest stores, which of course can afford the POS systems. And so from that, though, we're going to interpolate industry-wide averages of what constitutes sales. That's stupid. No one does statistics that way. Not if you cared whether the number was real. Another thing they'll do is they'll look at sales figures through retail chains like Barnes and Noble, and then they'll say, well, of all the things you sold and everything, what could be classified as graphic novel content? And when you put all this stuff together, they came up with numbers like, oh yeah, the comic book industry is amazing. It did $2 billion or so. I mean, it's never been better. But when you push them on the fine points of the whole thing, okay, well, how much of that's Marvel? How much of that's DC? How much of that is a floppy thing that looks like a comic book, as opposed to anything else with drawn sequential art on a page, which you find out most of what they're counting as graphic novels these days are things like The Adventures of Dogman or Captain Underpants or Dear Dumb Diary. If they're capturing manga in that, which has not traditionally been a big part of the U.S. comic. I mean, if you took someone from 1967 and you said, hey man, what's a comic book? I might have, if I was very worldly, I might have heard somewhere that over in Japan they read a lot of comics. They're in a foreign language. You got to read them backwards, and they're all black and white, and they put them in these small telephone book size things. Um, but that's not a comic book as far as I was concerned. Comic books were those things you paid 25 or 30 cents for, and you to try to get your friends not to wad up and stick in their back pockets as you're trading them on the block. Um, and certainly also, your kids' storybooks, friends, that wasn't comics as well. I mean, so when we're talking about comics are doing great, we're talking about something very different than what most of us are thinking about when we think about comics, right? If we think about just comics, like the monthly floppy comic books, you know, no, we're not doing great at all. The well, I guess the first sign that the industry is not doing great on this is when they hide the ball, right? It's the part where they used to release the sales figures, and now they're like, yeah, not so much. We're just gonna talk in vague generalities, but we won't actually tell you how many copies of something we sold, unless it's that one in a jillion event where they actually sold a big number. And a big number today is a number like 70,000. Used to be that anything under $30,000 was an instant cancellation at Marvel. And the big number books were selling a couple 300,000. One thing I love about comic books just in general is that you're talking about things that they're pop culture. They're easily accessible items. They were not rare in the slightest in terms of how many were originally produced. I mean, if you think, wow, Hulk 181, the first appearance of Wolverine, that's amazing. That's the rarest, most valuable comic book on the planet, right? Nonsense. They made well over 250,000 of them that were probably preserved in some form or another by collectors. When you look at early issues of pretty much all the main superheroes, the ones from the 40s and stuff. And yes, I'll fully stipulate that the numbers are gimmicked all different ways, and a lot of the stuff was pulped, and a lot of it was, hype and etc. But circulation numbers in the millions was the average of books like Batman and Superman. I mean, these were things that everyone knew, saw, etc. Now, they also treated them as valueless and threw them away. So the ones that survive in good condition in today's world, those things are legitimately scarce. But if you look at just a random issue of just whatever, what's the top of the stack here? Sirens, Love Hurts, a DC comic book, right? This one, I'm going to guess the circulation on this one. I don't know. I'd have to do some digging to get a better guess. If this thing moved 20,000 copies, I'd be shocked. It's pretty much everything that's selling in the floppy monthly comic format these days is selling at levels that 20 years ago would have canceled everyone involved. The only real success stories in the market right now are the Absolute line, especially Absolute Batman, and a couple odd titles here and there. Everything else is really not particularly impressive. I always get a kick out of when we're indexing all the infinite numbers of variants of different things, and some independent comic company will say things like, oh yes, well, this is a very special variant. It's limited to 5,000 copies. And I'm thinking, 5,000 copies for an independent comic? That's all the copies you made, period. I mean, that's on your best day, that's how many you would have ever moved. That's not a limited edition in the traditional sense of things. When you're talking about limiting it to 50 copies, we can get very interested. But 5,000, 3,000, even 1,000, no, that's actually just kind of like average circulations for a lot of y'all. So yeah, these things are not doing particularly well in the single copy end of things. Now, this is a problem on a number of fronts. For one thing, everyone like us, so again, people of a certain age, the Gen Xers and beyond, we got into comic books because, again, they're cheap. You pick them up, and you sit there and you pick up an issue of Punisher, and Punisher would do something interesting in that issue. You say, this is a cool series. I think I better pick up the next issue, and it would keep going. And to the extent that it wasn't just Frank Castle killing off the same guys issue after issue, there was investment in, if you read one, you'd want to read next week's issue and so forth. I mean, I remember being driven half stark raving mad as a kid. I somehow lucked across Captain America I think it was 198 or something like that. But it was first issues of the Mad Bomb saga. It was one of the first multi-issue storylines. It was actually going to draw on the whole thing, and and then I found, it was hunting high and low for the other issues, and when you finally discovered there was a thing called a comic book store somewhere on the planet where it was actually possible to say, have you got part 3 of the Mad Bomb saga? That was like an absolute change in the way that everything in your life worked at that point, because you could finally fill in the blanks in your head. That was great stuff. But look, if love Sirens, Love Hurts, book 3 of this thing right here, who's reading this and is sitting there going to say, oh man, I gotta read me book 4? I mean, it honestly, if you didn't pick up book 1 and 2 already because you always just like Poison Ivy or Catwoman or whoever's in the whole thing, if that wasn't something that you just always do, no one's going to read book 3 of this one and say, oh yeah, no, absolutely, my life is incomplete if I don't have book 4 of that one. So you don't get the build up. The collectors will go out there and, a lot of people pick number 1, because even like the dumbest of us figured out that, well, if anything's going to be valuable, it's going to be issue number 1, right? And so that's why, of course, why they relaunch issue number 1s every 5 minutes, and and try to get people to get turned on about that whole thing. It's also why we have the ridiculousness of legacy numbers, where after having restarted Punisher 15 times, we are on the 15th series of the Punisher. Marvel now has the gall to say, oh yeah, but it's even though it's number 3 of the 15th series of Punisher, it's legacy number 293 or something. Absolute psychoticness. But they're trying to use everything they can in order to sell the next issue of the thing, right? Anyway, they're not doing a great job of it. It must be said. It's the sheer numbers of people who are willing to read monthly comics way off from where it was 10, 15 years ago, 20 years for sure. Again, the highest number of books that we sell right now are at a level that they would have just been canceled, back in the 90s. It wouldn't have been a question. And the other problem we've got is that people are writing stories structured in such a way that I'm sure when Sirens, will eventually get collected into a trade paperback, right? So there will be a $14.95 version of, DC Sirens, which will be labeled as a number 1, of course. But it's going to collect the entire saga, and that's the point where, again, they might have a chance to move some copies of the whole thing. That's the problem with that, on the other hand, is that if you didn't sell enough copies of the original issues, you don't get enough issues to collect into the trade paperback. Now, this one here, I'm going to guess it's over the mark. But what about someone who's launching a brand new series that no one's heard of before? It doesn't feature Catwoman. It doesn't feature Poison Ivy. It features Mighty Guy. The hero from Pluto, who's going to be the coolest thing you've ever seen if you'd ever read his adventures, but you'd never heard of him before. If he moves 1,000 copies of the first issue, 300 copies of issues number 2, there won't be an issue number 3. There will not be a trade paperback, and that's the end of the adventures of Mighty Guy. Ironically, Mighty Guy is actually a hero. That's something else. I was just trying to come up with a meaningless character name, but it's hard to get the word out now about new things when you go this route. So, what happens? So, Marvel and company have tried a couple different things. They've tried something that I think might work, but honestly, I think it's kind of corrosive. We just got these in today. These are some of the free comic book day things that are starting to show up. I'm under strict prohibition. I actually got the note saying we're not allowed to sell these or give them away until official free comic book day in like a month. So that's great. They'll be sitting there on my shelf until then. But the idea there is they're doing the same thing I did at the garage sale. They're saying, all right, well, hey, you've never heard of this thing before. We'd like to get you excited. Here, it's free. Try it out. Check it out. And honestly, I don't know if it's a great idea. I'll say this now, that it's no free comic book day is no longer a thing. It's now Oh God, it's what do they call it now? It's broken into two different things. Because Free Comic Book Day was a trademark owned by Diamond Comics, I believe, at the end. So you can't say Free Comic Book Day anymore on your trade offerings. So now it's like first Friday in May Day, which because that's when it's traditionally done. And there's some like local comic something day. There's two other things offered by the two distributors, but they basically amount to Free Comic Book Day. It's like there's a time when like let's give away your samplers cheap, day is the way. Like it's not to just get the thing in people's hands. It's not the worst idea in the world. It's probably like a 1 in 10 reaction. Best case. It's kind of like when you have a show that you're advertising, and you've got a local theater production where nobody's buying the tickets because no one's heard of it. You say, well, hey, special promotion for Orchard Supply buyers here. You can get tickets to the amazing production we've got in town of blah 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 the play. And if you give away 10 times the number of tickets that you actually expect, you will actually get enough butts in seats, so it won't be a complete devastating disappointment, for the actors who are on stage looking it out and the whole thing. But just giving me a free thing, I mean, the good news is you at least got me to think about it for a second, because up until then I hadn't thought about it for even a second. But you also told me, it's not actually worth money. And so that's not a great marketing pitch. You always want to lead with the idea of this is something amazingly rare, and you are the luckiest person on the planet to have been offered this amazing opportunity. The only reason that you were offered is because I like you so damn much. That's what you're hoping for when you give away something for free. You don't want to be like, we couldn't sell them, so hey, take the free thingy. That's the sort of thing that gets pitched in the next available garbage can. It's like the free table over at San Diego Comic-Con, if you've ever seen that. It's the greatest littering source of glossy literature you will ever witness. And absolutely, we once or twice put brochures on the free comic table there. And if we could track a dozen sales to having given away 1,000 items, that would be an amazing turnout for us. So yeah, no, it's free is not a great way to go. The other way to go, on the other hand, is something that I do like. Well, so comic companies. Sorry, I actually do have a variety of different things that I've got behind me here. I have props. I've actually arranged this today, but another thing that comic companies are doing, when they can't, get you interested in the freebies, they're trying a lot of alternate marketing. So in other words, we won't show you the free comic book day. We can include it as a free sampler. You do like the sampler, if I print like an extra 8 pages in a comic book, I can include here's a preview of Lobo #1, and I can stick that into the comic book as well. That's a thing. It could happen. It might help a little. It probably doesn't help all that much, but it didn't cost you much to try. But the other thing that people are trying more and more is trying to advertise your wares by use of alternate media. So in other words, if I can't interest you in the idea of the new comic book in comic book format, maybe I can draw a straight a short animated cartoon and get you interested in that way and make you think it's something that we're actually putting some marketing muscle behind. I think that one actually has a little bit more chance of getting interest if it's done particularly well. But it is time intensive. It does require an amount of focus on Marvel's marketing that isn't often seen. You often see this on behalf of creators where it does actually convert from time to time. This is what Kickstarter campaigns are made of. And that is also a big way that that the comic market is moving, is towards the idea like, look, I've got an idea for a thing. The adventures of comic book guy, and honestly, this is something that I think I could sell 3,000 copies of. I'm never going to get Marvel or DC particularly interested in the whole thing. Certainly, if they don't own the property, they're never going to want to touch it. But 3,000 copies, 5,000 copies, it's not enough to get somebody like that interested. Now, if I think I can get 10,000 copies sold this thing, I could maybe publish it through something like Image, where maybe it works out. Maybe I'm the next Walking Dead. It could happen, right? But probably, it kind of withers on the vine. But if this is my baby, right? I really care about this one. Well, it turns out I can launch a Kickstarter on the whole thing. and I can produce my own graphic material. I can go on my own social medias and pimp the whole thing. I can, especially if I come from a social media background myself, where I've gotten people very interested in me because I have a very famous podcast. I have a very cool Twitch gaming show. Whatever else. We've seen some, creative, things come up over the years that have been absolutely amazing. Uh, God, the video game one with like the Sea of Blood, where it's like a YouTube streamer put together one of the most independent, wildly profitable independent movies of the year, based on the idea of hey, I really care about this property. I really care about making this thing happen. I've got enough people that I can educate about it by just putting out to my audience that I can get you into the theater. And as a result, the guy made crap tons of money on an absolutely independent production on the whole thing. But you can do the same thing with comic books. If you look at the success of the Rippaverse, where it's just one guy who had a lot of people who listen to his YouTube show, hooked up with some artists, who got some talent. He's some talent as a writer himself. Is it the best thing I've ever read? No. Is it life-changing? No. Was it fine? Absolutely. But he managed to sell millions of dollars worth of $35 editions. And sometimes if you buy one, well, you may as well get the B cover and the C cover and the collected edition, the autographed, signed plate, whatever else. You feel that connection with the creator that way. He'll have a tipped in book plate and so forth. And yeah, you can make real money doing that sort of thing. So looking at things I've blown my own money on. This is my first purchase from Comic-Con last year. Was it's a guy named Dave Kellett. He does the Sheldon comics. But yeah, I basically made beeline to his booth, said, "Hey man, I see you've got a new book out. Can I buy it?" He's like, "Absolutely." And then of course he tipped it a sketch for me just right there on the spot, and and so forth. And yeah, he does terrific stuff. I feel great about the whole thing. I'll be back to buy the next one. $30, cha-ching, and I'll do it again next time. And of that $30, he walks home with all $30 less his production costs. He doesn't have to, split that, at 4 to 1 with with a publisher. That is a way to go. And if you've got enough of an idea, enough of passion behind it, that is a way to sell comic books in this day and age. Now, but let's get back to your lowly comic shop owner. So he's probably not selling tons and tons of floppy comic books so much anymore. And honestly, I can't think of the last time I walked into a comic shop in my area that had deep inventory of anything. I mean, the idea that I could go to a title that I collect, say Tomb of Dracula, and say, "Oh yeah, I'm still looking for issue 57," and find that, have any plausible chance of finding that in a comic store. It's been 15 years since I was in the comic store that was so vast, with so many, so much backstock like that I'd have any kind of chance of that happening. No, it's the best you hope for these days, if you walk into a comic store that actually has back issue inventory, is that there's enough weird rando stuff in the shop somewhere that you find something interesting that's worth going through. I mean, I was in went out in Nashville the other day, I think it was The Great Escape, and I found all sorts of, kind of messed up copies of Savage Sword of Conan, which was great for $3 each. It's like, I don't care if they're, near men or not, they were fine. But if I was looking to fill in my run, forget about it. It's not going to happen. So when you look at the regular comic store owner, and again, their job is to stay alive. What are they doing? They're deprioritizing. I mean, if they've got expensive comics, absolutely they'll give them, love and space in their shop. If they have just random comics, right? Probably they've been pushing that stuff onto online systems to sell it, either eBay or Atomic Avenue or what have you. Maybe they've got their own store, and so forth. That stuff has actually moved away from using up the shop space more and more for people. And as far as ordering new comic books, I mean, I used to be able to walk into Brian's Comic Books back in San Jose, and yeah, I could see the last 4 weeks of every single title that had come out from every publisher on the planet, and I could say, "Oh, this one looks interesting," and pick up new things. That's great, but those stores that still do that, few and far between. I mean, they do exist, but you're a lucky person if you've got the ability to have one. Well, when that stuff goes away, when you can't have the new stores able to showcase a large number of your content, when you're fighting like crazy to even give away promo material to make it sell, it becomes kind of a death spiral of the new thing. You don't want that to happen, because where's the new reader who's going to pick up the new thing and want to get to it next time? I mean, it's one thing for me to say, "Hey, look, if Dave Kellett comes up with anything new, I'm going to buy it." If Steve Rude, and Mike Barron, they had a note that they had a new volume of the Nexus Deluxe Omnibus, which is, again, gorgeous volume. It's on Kickstarter. Yeah, I get out my credit card instantly for them. It's like, $100, boom, you have it. There you have it. Take my money. That's a thing that can happen, but it's hard to make a store out of that. Now, the store, meanwhile, is having a really rough time, because he's competing against, well, what's he got left to sell that's comics, right? You can't make it with regular new floppies, right? If that becomes a harder and harder game, or if the only thing you're really moving a lot of is the absolutes, or the mainline Marvel, Spider-Man, and so forth. When it comes down to, like, you're only really moving quantity on a dozen titles, that's a rough business for you. You say, well, can you make it up on trade paperbacks? And the answer is no, you really can't. Because for trade paperbacks, mostly you're competing against places like Amazon or libraries or things like that. One thing that's a problem with trade paperbacks is, it's a lovely format, but it's, all right, let's start with the upsides. First of all, it's durable. They're less easily screwed up. Whereas comic books, you look at them funny, and you take them from near mint to very fine conditions, shave off a third of their value. Trade paperbacks, it's like, yeah, no, a little bit of shelfware. Most people don't care. They'll keep doing it. One thing that trade paperbacks typically don't have going for them is collectability. I mean, there's a couple, and I mean a couple exceptions. If you have a very first printing of Batman, the Dark Knight Returns, or Batman the Dark Knight, it's actual time. Dark Knight Returns, if anyone cares, is issue number 1 of that. But anyway, if you got that, yeah, it's worth a few bucks. But it's worth a few bucks. If you had a copy of, the floppy, comic of something rare of approximately the same vintage, like the floppy issue of Hulk 181 is only a few years older than Batman, the Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns first print will get you $200. A perfect copy of the floppy of Hulk 181 will get you, $3,000 to $5,000. So yeah, it's the collectability factor is just not there for the trade paperbacks. And most trade paperbacks, honestly, if you get cover out of them, selling them back again, or whatever else, you're doing well. It's not something that people really think is collectible. The other thing that's a problem with trade paperbacks for a comic store is you're competing against places like Amazon, right? So I could order it from you, my beloved local comic shop, where I've spent any number of hours reading all those issues of those easily damaged comic books from you. But then when it comes time to drop the $25 on the Punisher trade paperback, do I go to you, or do I save 25% and order it off Amazon? You know what most people are going to do. And then there's the problem of when it's in trade paperback, you kind of, that addictive quality, for the most part, is kind of gone. You don't sit there and say, well, like, I read the one before, and I read, I read the cycle after it, but I gotta read the cycle in the middle to understand what's happened with the character. Typically, that's not the way it all works. I mean, typically, for most characters, that's something where we reassigned the writer and the artist, and there was just a different, we gave them a 6 issue gig in order to do the cycle and so forth. It's honestly, from the character standpoint, it's unrelated. Nothing will have happened to the character in that 6-issue arc that matters to either side of it, with rare exception. When you get legendary runs of things like Grant Morrison's runs or Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men or something, there you get something where, like, yeah, you kind of want to see the entire arc, in which case that's wonderful for the publisher, because then you can make an omnibus out of it. You can sell me a giant book that's this thick about the whole thing, and I will actually care. Or if I read one trade paperback, I'll want to read the other ones, because the characters will have actually kind of changed and evolved somewhat during that whole thing. That's not a thing that typically happens with most characters, on the other hand. As a result, there's nothing that kind of forces you to kind of have that gotta have it feel. at your local comic shop. And so he's a little bit out in the in the he's left hanging on that one. By the way, one really, because I have the prop ready, I'll show this one off. One really good way, if you are a comic shop or a comic publisher and you want to get people to have that, hey, you read volume 1, you read volume 3, but what about volume 2? If you want them to really feel that, easiest trick in the book, you've got to leave the missing link somehow in the user's head on the whole thing. Some people back in the days when they had pulp novels like Conan the Conan, or the what was the Executioner, things like that. Someone had the genius idea of putting the numbers on the side of the mass market trade paperbacks. Because the publishers explained at one point to me, they said, yeah, because we know there's a certain number of people that if there's a missing sequence as they look at their bookshelf, if they're missing number 31 of the Executioner, they will go and it will always be on the hunt for it because it'll just bug them. Well, a much stronger way to do that with the world of comic books, especially because there isn't these long arcs of history where you've got one consistent character that has a long uninterrupted run. We're always restarting the cycle every 15 minutes to get that new issue number 1. Well, the problem with that is it breaks the idea that I'm also trying to form a chain. Someone who did this absolutely brilliantly, if you look behind me here, I think the camera can get it, is these are Eagle Moss graphic novels. It's a small section of my bookshelf on these ones, because I actually have a set of these on some special purpose-built bookshelves on my office walls that goes on several shelves worth, where it's this beautiful Alex Ross painting, continuous across the entire run of the series. And yes, did I, buy, Batman and the Outsiders? Did I blow $15 on this book just because if I didn't do it, I would not be having Green Arrow's right eye as I looked at my bookshelf? You're damn right I did. But yes, no, that is a great way to go if you have the foresight to know that you're selling things in sequence. Put the sequence right on the outside cover of the whole thing. One graphic novel set that I got very interested in, because I actually saw the series on Netflix, Alice in Borderland, is a manga, and they have a cityscape that if you have all the manga arranged on your shelf, it forms this vast bombed-out Tokyo cityscape or post-apocalyptic Tokyo, where the whole thing takes place, and it looks terrific on your shelf. Have I bought lots and lots of Marvel Masterworks simply because they looked really good together and I was missing a particular issue number? Yes, I did. So if you're going to be in this business, publishers, yes, I think that's a way to go. Anyway, I do want to talk about a couple other ways that the market's changing, and then kind of offer my take on what's going to go on in the end, and then try to wrap this whole line up, because I realize I've covered a lot of ground, and honestly, I'm trying to only cover this from the sales angle. It's not even down to the stuff that really counts, which is where's the magic in our lives on this stuff, that's really why we buy things, and that's a whole different discussion. When you look at the other major formats that are happening in the comics world today, and let's keep this to just the things that you and I would traditionally think of as comics. We're not talking about Dogman here. We're not talking about Dear Dumb Diary. We're talking about the things that graphic novelty type things that we all fell in love with. I hope back in the day. Other countries did it differently. Now we talked a little bit about manga, and we're seeing manga, if you look to stores, that is made a hell of a comeback. And it's even, if you look at the DC compact novels, where they're taking manga formatting and taking something where I wrap a whole bunch of issues of Batman together in a volume that will not break my wallet. Maybe I cut down on the paper size, but I give you something that's this thick. I'm going to blow $14 on it, but it gives me like a really solid hunk of reading. I feel like I got something for my money. It's not collectible. I'm not going to make money selling this to my friend when it's done. I might get most of my money back if I sell it off to him, but I won't. It's, again, the collectability thing is something that is not part of that thing. But if you look at what DC's done with their compact novels, that's actually, I think, a very positive sign. Manga basically is going for about $11 these days, and they sell you black and white. It's, to an American reader, it's weird for me. It's a different art style and storytelling style you got to get used to. It's definitely a culturation thing. But there have been times when I've gotten drawn into a particular one, whether it's Attack on Titan or Alice in Borderland or whatever else. We're like, okay, I'm now up to speed. It's kind of like the way if you start a Shakespeare play, it's like the first 20 minutes of the play is like, what are they even saying? And an hour into it, like, you don't even think about it anymore. Your brain has managed to start the automatic translator, and it's fully up and running by then. Manga works the same way. It's like, yeah, you don't even think about it. Yeah, you're flipping the pages backwards. Yes, there's lots and lots of speed lines everywhere, and the characters are all, visually there's a different storytelling language to it. But after a while, if the story catches you up, you feel like it's an okay deal, and you feel like you got your money's worth. And if you look at what Barnes and Noble and the other stores are doing with those, they're moving manga in big numbers. Now, it doesn't help the local comic shop, because now he's competing as Barnes and Noble, and he's going to lose that one most of the time, not unless he brings something special to the thing. And then the final one I wanted to bring out, and this is one that to me, it's what hits me closest to home. In terms of like what I, as an adult guy, would be most interested in reading, is, if you guys have ever heard of a term called bande dessinée. It's French. It's basically French for comics, or comic strip books. French in Belgium, they call them BD. Yes, which B&D means something different to American audiences. But anyway, it's think about things like heavy metal collections, Mebius. They've got fantastic stuff going on, and honestly, it reads much more naturally to an American reader. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the source material, goes everywhere from, like, the Adventures of Tintin, which, by the way, just entered the public domain, to Asterix and Obelix, Tex, again, anything by Mebius, the heavy metal stuff, and and so forth. Absolutely terrific art, absolutely terrific source material you can draw on. And I would so love to see so much more of this into the American market. Unfortunately, it's been a little choked off. It's one of those things where manga made it huge. It took a lot of years, but it did. And bande dessinée has been kind of like, pecking on the surface, but never really penetrated the market in the way that some of this other stuff did. You see it from time to time, but if you go to, like, go over to Italy and go in the bookstore and look at essentially the comics graphic novel section, you are so far beyond, like, the kind of superheroes just bopping each other over the head stuff that we got going on here. It's a much more interesting thing as an adult to be looking into, because you've got all the genres represented into the artwork, often absolutely fantastic, and just great stuff. I mean, because I do think there's real magic to the comic storytelling form, and so I would love to see more of, like, the bande dessinée happening. Now, see, I mean, let me just kind of wrap the concept here. Do we need floppies? Well, it's funny, because the market in a way is saying, no, we don't. More and more, if you just look at what's selling, we're not selling floppies. Now, yeah, you and I are going to buy them. They're going to exist. We'll have them in ComicBase. We will still be indexing thousands of these things every month. But as far as this being the majority way that anyone who knows comics experiences comics, it hasn't been true for 10 years. Again, ask any kid or ask anyone, do you know who Batman is? Absolutely. Bruce Wayne, he does blah, 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 and so forth. You say, have you ever read a Batman comic book? And they'd be like, it's like that. So, I mean, I think it matters that this stuff is in the culture and that's going well. That I think is great. We're doing good on that whole thing. The problem we've got, on the other hand, is everyone who relies on this selling in large quantities as the basis of your business model, ouch, that's tough. Now, if you're on the collector end of things, so, I mean, is there some version of this one that's worth $5,000, especially if it's in a CGC slab in 9/8 condition? Yes, there's money to be made in that whole thing, and that's going to keep on going. It's its own thing. But the market has chosen the format, and the format that was the choice for 60, 70 years is not the format that's really moving today. I think there's some hope to be had. I mean, if you think about music, right? So music once upon a time was wax cylinders, or once upon a time was piano roll score. You get to know someone who played piano, and as a result, a lot of people, one of the ways you became known as a cultured person is you had someone in your family who could play piano and entertain people. But when records hit, the dawn of the rock and roll era, we were talking about 45 RPM. You have not seen a 45 RPM record in a dog's age, I guarantee. I think the last person I ever knew who bought one probably was in the 80s. It was there's a little T-shirt design where they show the adapter, the little triangular thing that that sits on the inside of the thing and adapts it to fit on your record player spindle. That it's like a pop culture trivia quiz. It's like you were alive in the 80s if you even know what this device is. People don't buy 45s anymore. Somewhere in the 70s, it switched almost entirely to album-oriented fare. Then albums came, then albums got replaced by CDs. CDs had a really good run, and then they got replaced by, wait for it, albums. And it's really strange about the way that happened. Albums have been outselling physical CDs for a number of years now. And the weird thing is, when you get the album, I don't know that anyone plays it. I mean, I think you maybe take it out ceremonially and play it a couple of times, but the way that people listen to music, honestly, is it exists as digital form and it gets streamed into their life. Now, do you still listen to music? You're damn right you still listen to music. Is music still a force in your life? Yeah. Can you sell music in a record store? Ooh, different question. Because if I owned a record store in 1980, I mean, you notice the Tower Records isn't with us anymore. The Virgin Megastores, I've spent so many years. I mean, it used to be like if you wanted to keep Pete happy, the only thing you had to do is have a Virgin Megastore and a comic book shop in your city. And I didn't need anything else to do on that vacation. I would go to London just to be at those two locations. I mean, I have a very skewed view of the geography of London, because everything relies on what's the path to the next comic store and what record stores is that going to take me past. And yeah, I think I noticed that there was some statuary in a couple theaters in between those things, but that was all I cared about when I would visit London. Anyway, that's not how it works now. Tower Records is no longer with us. Tower Records tried to sell anything else, and then eventually they couldn't sell enough CDs or anything that involved music to keep the rent going, and they packed it in. The internet kind of took that away. Ironically, when you find music stores, and you can find record stores now, they sell things I can't play. I mean, I sold my record player sometime in the 90s. I striped my last CD up to digital, my last LP up into digital format. I sold off, or I donated the records that were with it. And I never thought twice about it, because honestly, having lived through the vinyl era where you've memorized the pops and the crackles as if it's part of the sound of the record, I don't miss it. I mean, I like music that sounds good. I mean, the funny thing is, when you play something that has got that kind of scratchy thing like that, you do it as like almost like a dubstep effect now. It's something you would actually add to a recording to make it sound old timey. You don't listen to it as the music anymore. No, it's funny because like we have record stores all over. This is Music City after all. They sell vinyl. They sell things that I literally can't take in and play, and I still look at them and think, maybe I'd buy that album because it's really cool. It's nice to hold the thing you love in your hand and experience in some format or another. In much the same way that, look, I've read Nexus, I've owned the original issues. I read the color reprints of the whole things. I've owned several of the collections, and I just blew $100 to buy it all again, just so I could hold it in my hand again, feel that connection with Baron and Brood, who they were at Madison the same time I was, and so forth, and have the thing you love in your hand in a way that you care about. When I was building the gazebo, when you do any construction project, you got to choose the music, and it's very important because the whole fate of the construction project relies on choosing the appropriate music. If you guys are ever doing tiling, by the way, hair metal is the preferred music. But for doing gazebo construction, Kaiser Chiefs and Kasabian were my go-tos this year. And as it turns out, there's an album they had called Duck, which for whatever reason is impossible to buy through normal channels for normal amounts of money. And the cheapest way I could find it is there's a guy who had one signed by the band on eBay for 20 bucks. And I was like, sign me up, absolutely. And he this one is actually, by the way, if you guys worth checking out the video on this one. They do a fabulous job with all their videos, but this one in particular is, there's a song called Record Collection that's on this album. And it's a little esoteric. If you think about that, just imagine you're the video director and you've got to direct the conceptual thing, keeping up with the high standard of previous music videos like Ruby and things like that. And you've got to come up with one that illustrates the concept of a song called Record Collection, where it's about the meaning of the record collection in your life, about how it's a recording of everything you've ever seen and heard and thought about, and how it gives you a sense of that everything is going to be okay in the end. And you've got to bring that to life somehow. And the way they did it in the video, I'm not even going to spoil it to you. It's fantastic. It's really creative, and it's got nothing to do with the band. You see the band for like 5 seconds at the beginning as they kind of say, and now over to our studios in France where we are going to show this thing for you. And you see something really cool. But of note, kind of like the chorus on this one kind of ends with the whole idea that, yeah, it's a weird changing thing, but it's all going to be okay in the end. And I think that's where I'm going to end it, is I think we go through a lot of turmoil in our life right now when we see the world changing on us. I mean, the stuff that I knew and I've really wrapped a lot of my head around. I've devoted a lot of my consciousness to memorizing all the origins of all the characters and knowing how the sales figures ran and what the relative values are of the different issues and who was Peter Parker's girlfriend here and why isn't he with her anymore. And I've so much of my brain is devoted to that and and new wave song lyrics that honestly, it's amazing I have room for anything else. But I mean, you do all that stuff in your head because it gives you a sense of history, it gives you a sense of connection with the things you love. And it also gives you this sense that I know where it's all going and it's all going to work out okay. We're in a time now where you can feel everything changing. I mean, I feel it changing on my day job with AI all the time. It's deeply unsettling. I feel it changing with the comics formats, publishers going out of business. You see formats that are not working more. Things that used to sell 100,000 issues easily are selling 10,000 issues and so forth. You see comic stores that can't even be called comic stores anymore. And you're thinking, geez, Louise, are we losing it all? Is it all going to work out or not? And then you look at what happened with music, and I think I've kind of come to the conclusion it's all going to be okay in the end. We're going to change all the formats. We've been changing all the formats. I mean, after a while, it's like you can't even, the change happens so slowly, it becomes invisible to you until that one day when you look at the total number of orders you've got stacked up for Spider-Man and realize I can't make the minimum order on Penguin in order to keep the account open, and you have to make the announcement that you're stopping new comic ordering in your shop. That one feels like it came out of the blue to your customers. It's been happening to you bit by bit by bit by bit for 10 years. But it's hard for even you to see it until one day you just can't make that thing work the way it was. I think we've been seeing stuff like this happening in the comic industry with formats and the way we distribute things up, down, and sideways all day long. And yet, we've never seen more people in our lives who knew who the hell Peter Parker was. We've never seen more people in our life who knew who Deadpool was, or the Punisher, or Batman, or whatever else. Where you can have a conversation with a random person, and they might be wondering why you're talking about Batman. But I mean, you can drop memes in about it's always better to be yourself, unless you can be Batman. In which case, be Batman, and people get what the hell you're talking about. So I mean, in a way, comics have won. It's just the weird thing is the thing we think of as the comic book itself. It's kind of going, other ways. I see my kids go to the library. They check out graphic novels. They return them, which breaks my heart afterwards because they're not piling up infinite numbers of them on their shelves, because guys who made graphic novels didn't have the foresight to think, let's draw a really large Alex Ross picture across the spines so that the second that you have a gap in the whole thing, you'll feel an ache in your life because there's something missing. We'll figure this stuff out in the end. But I think in the end, it's all going to work out. It's just at the moment, I'm feeling somewhat sanguine about the whole thing. I think it's all going to be different than we knew, and it's all going to be fine. But anyway, that's my take at least. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.